Good day everyone, and welcome to the tell-all version of my review of the Empal Surecon. You might be thinking to yourself, this is just Frank milking this mock for views. Anyways, I wanted to make a video that was essentially something wherein I could give those who were interested the longer story, the full version of how this mock came to be, how it was, the arduous, laborious process through which I constructed a mock of such fantastical accuracy, beauty, perfection. I recently have been making a database on my computer of all the mocks that I've made previously. I've been really bad over the course of my life of taking pictures or videos of my mocks. I'm a very humble man in that way. But no, I'm making this document right now. And, you know, as I was going through it, previously I had made 2 mocks depicting the Darth Vader transformation scene in Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. That scene has always been fascinating to me. I remember I spent most of my childhood absolutely terrified of that scene. The thought of seeing Anakin burning alive, that gorgeous, gorgeous man just getting cooked, and then seeing him in that nightmarish surgery, it always scared me for a long time. But I distinctly remember that ever since I actually built up the nerve to watch the scene in its entirety, it's always fascinated me. And so, over the course of several years, I have had, like I said, a few efforts that have gone into depicting that particular scene. Now, all of my depictions of that scene, I built them between the years of 2005 and obviously like the year that the newer one came out. Both of these mocks were made sort of in that like zone between the 2 mocks when I assumed we'd never see a Darth Vader transformation again. And don't you dare even try to come in here saying that Palpatine's shuttle is another Darth Vader transformation set, because that is an insult to Darth Vader transformation sets. Anyways, so yeah, the first one I made at around like 2012, around then. It wasn't really that good, it was a little too big. Like I said, all of my previous mocks of Darth Vader's transformation were all interiors, so it was just like the operation room. It wasn't really that impressive, it was a bit too big, and I remember I didn't keep it together for that long. The second one that I made, which I made in 2016, no, not 2016, I made it in like 2015, 2014. It was actually like a back-to-back thing, where one half of the mock was like Darth Vader being born, and the other half of the mock was Padme dying. So like the one half was all like white and clean and fresh and pretty, and the other one was all dark and ghoulish and nightmarish, as Darth Vader's transformation is. That one was much better than my first mock. But anyways, a few weeks ago, I was in the library, writing about these mocks, you know, documenting them for the thing. And I was writing about those ones, and also I was writing about my old mock for the Half-Life 2 Citadel, something that I had made a while back as well. And I was thinking to myself, you know what, these are both really cool things, you know, and I want to make something that is architecturally grand. Ever since the First Light, which was my last massive mock, ever since the First Light fell over, which is what happened to it, it was 9 feet tall and it accidentally fell over one day. The First Light is a ship from Solo I was trying to build, but anyways, all that misery aside, I was thinking to myself, I want to make something, a grand architectural statement, you know? I want to make a big building, essentially. I want to either remake the Half-Life 2 Citadel, or I want to make a Darth Vader's transformation inside of an Empal Surecon. That's what I said. And so I'm like, I don't know which of these 2, you know, buildings I want to create, you know? And so I turned to my two of my closest confidants who happened to be there in the library with me at the time. That was my lover, Rob, and my friend Brianna. And I'm like, Rob, Brianna, Citadel or Empal Surecon? Brianna said Citadel, Rob said Surecon, so the Surecon it was. And from there, I went into, making blueprints and getting ready, sort of making sure that I had enough supplies. I know that all sounds very official, and it sounds like that's a lot of prep, but it really isn't that much. It's just sort of me going over, like, part lists on Bricklinks so I can make sure I have enough of X part to theoretically make a thing, I think of very sort of specific parts, and I'm just like, I gotta make sure that I have enough of this piece. If I don't, can I improvise with something else? Yes, yes. So, Mazel Tov. And, so that's what I did. I prepared, and then, that weekend after I had that discussion on the Monday, the weekend after, I got to making the Empal Surecon. And it started off, as you can see on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, it's at GayBoyLego. Started off as just that disc down there that you can see. See that, like, gray bit? I just laid down, I think that's two brick height, octagon with, like, some plates over top, and then I built up underneath with, like, a bunch of, like, Technic reinforcements, because it's never too early to reinforce a mock. I can never stress that enough. It is never too early to reinforce a mock, because, as I would be realizing as I started to build this thing up, reinforcing the lower, earlier parts would become absolutely impossible. So I built up that first disc as sort of the placeholder, and largely because you can see that the building in the movie, you can't really see the bottom of it, you can just sort of see the top part of it. So this, I decided to build not the entire Empal Surecon, but like the top bit that we can actually make out. If you see in the movie, there's actually like a little bit of like a side building, which is like right over here, that sort of looks like a sort of cone or like an arch. Like there's actually a little bit of an extra building over here. However, the actual model that I'm depicting takes place from above that, so that was not added. Maybe someday I'll make an even taller Surecon that works in like the lower, almost invisible parts of this building, but we'll see. But yeah, so I decided with that nice, big, firm base at the bottom, from there, that would be the rock on which I would build my kingdom, as it were. And so from there, I started to build up the sort of, the dark gray plates that you can see at the bottom there. It is essentially an octagon of dark gray plates. How I did that was, the ones that you can see that face like in regular directions, like just the standard horizontal and vertical plates, those ones are secured quite simply with some snot, and yeah, not really that difficult at all. The diagonal ones, I decided to go for those ones. I was going to take the turntables, and I was going, like the larger 4x4 turntable pieces, and I was going to turn them 45 degrees so that like the actual disc on top of the turntable would be turned 45 degrees, and then from that I would build the struts, which would then hold up the diagonal parts of the tower. This made it so that as I was building this thing up, I was essentially alternating between parts that were built the thing vertically and horizontally, and then I would have the next layer have it be so that it was the diagonal facing plates. So as this thing was getting built up, first, just something to add, as I was building it up, the sort of black parts that you can see on the diagonal plates, I was building those with it as it was going up, but I'll mention the large light gray struts in a sec. So I was building this thing up, and I, as it was going up, it occurred to me very early on, I was probably only like less than a foot up, and I realized that since this thing is 360 degrees, so no matter what, as soon as I've made like the next layer of plates, like the next like internal layer of like horizontal, diagonal, there was no way I could reach my hand like down in between them. The space in between the struts that held up the horizontal and vertical parts, and then the ones that held up the diagonal parts, was so tight that no matter what, I could not reach my hand in there. So, as soon as things were in place, I would not be able to return to the bottom of the structure without literally tearing the entire thing down. There was no, like, extra door, there was nothing precautionary that I had put in place so that I would be able to weasel my hand in to fix something, like, towards the bottom. This made it so that when I destroy this thing, at the bottom, there is a bunch of pieces down there, just like at the very bottom of this tube. So many times I would be building up here, like there would be some sort of Technic bit, or I'd be sort of securing a strut, my hand would slip, and it would sort of, I could see it clitter-clatter down into the dark depths below. Like, as soon as it tumbled down there, gone forever, you know? I was like, well, better not have been an essential part, because that just tumbled all the way down this massive shaft. But yeah. So, after a while, you know, I'm building up this tube, and, you know, I'm looking at the pictures, and I decide it's time to build the little light balconies. These little bad boys that you can see right here, I decided to build those. And, so I did. And this was one of the parts that I was a little bit concerned of, because each of those little balconies features 7 little blue lights on struts. These are Gandalf's staff bar pieces right here, as you can see. Gandalf's staff bar pieces that have the blue bits on them. And because I genuinely was like, as soon as I realized I need to do that, I'm like, holy shit, I didn't take inventory for light gray Gandalf staffs. So I was really panicked, but fortunately I managed to pull out 28 of them, which I needed for that entire thing down there. You might be noticing, by the way, that this one over here is looking just a little bit crooked, but I will mention that later, because that was not something that happened amidst all the other garbage. So anyways, it was only a little while after I had installed those balconies, which, by the way, I put in by extending the, bricks on the vertical, horizontal, sort of plate attachments, so that, these little balconies would be, like, sticking out from the diagonal portions, but they're on, like, they're connected to the, they're not connected at all to, like, the diagonal portions. They're only connected to the, vertical, horizontal plate portions. So after that, I decided very shortly I'd be working on my first set of petals, which, as you can see, are these sort of, like, layered, things just coming off of it. I don't really know what the word is for these large, like, kind of diagonal plates that are coming off of the building, but they're there, and they add a lot of visual flair. So, I decided, by just experimenting with some different, like, Technic bits and whatnot, I made right around there, like, right where you can see the petal, the base of the petal, I decided to just make that like a plateau, you know? Really reinforce that, cap it off, so that the base that these presumably heavy petals would be based on would be quite, like, sturdy, you know? Because I knew that these petals, you know, they're kind of hanging off the thing, probably gonna be, like, dicey to hold those up, so I just built a firm layer right there. And so, from there, I experimented with Technics, and I don't know the exact name of it, but there is a Technic part that's like a strut that sort of curves at a 45 degree. So I decided to use a bunch of those, and I started to secure the bottom black plates that you can see right there. From the black plates, I built up not actually the dark gray bit that you can see sandwiched between the black and the light gray. I built the light gray parts next, but I didn't add the dark gray parts on top of the light gray bits yet. I built the light gray bits so that I would be able to get a sense of how much of the dark gray to put in there, so that it would be able to be perfectly sandwiched in between the black and the light gray while seeming organic. There is not a single curved piece inside that dark gray bit right there. That is all just bricks at various, like, heights, which I stack, like, a lot of trial and error with sandwiching, a lot of trial and error to make sure it was the right height of brick for like each ascending level, to make sure that it would be just the right amount. So after a lot of trial and error, I had like my benchmarks, and I just replicated that to the other 3 sides. Then, before actually putting the light gray portions on top, I put the dark gray little bits of greebling on top of the light gray petals, and I also added on the little petal tips that you can see sort of hanging off there, because if you look on the Surecon, the end of these petals actually have little parts that face downwards and not diagonally. So, added those on, added those top bits, and then I very gingerly, using hinged parts, obviously, to make sure that the angle would be dynamic, I used a bunch of hinge pieces so as to gingerly secure these petals onto the bottom parts of the petal. I know, I'm very eloquent, aren't I? Anyways, moving all the way up, I should mention that as I was doing this entire petal portion, I kind of really started to neglect the diagonal black and dark gray parts, and a lot of what I did to build up the light gray, a lot of what I did to make the petal parts made it really, really hard to properly install these black and dark gray parts. And as a matter of fact, I have to admit that those black and dark gray parts after the balconies are attached to absolutely nothing. They're suspended in space. They've got they're built up at the back, so they kind of fit into the interior, into the internal build. But they're held on literally by a whim and a prayer. There is not a single stud connection on any of those upper diagonal portions. Literally, they're just kind of suspended there. But what helped suspend them there was these flaps right here, which were the next part that I built. However, it was not the flaps that held them in place, it was the pipes on the bottom of the flaps. Because you see, if you watch Revenge of the Sith, you will see that the Surecon has these flap things, but it also has these pipes hanging down from these flap things. And that was the perfect opportunity. So I built these flaps, and I made it so that the flaps had very tightly secured tubes. And those tubes hanging down right there are actually what are keeping those panels in place. It is basically those tubes and those tubes alone that are ensuring that that plate stands right there. So yeah, moving up, I decided, I forgot to mention that actually before I made the petals, I very painstakingly made the light gray struts. If you can hear piano playing, I'm sorry, my sister just got on it and that's all she ever freaking does. I had to build these light gray struts that go up the vertical and horizontal panels, which was really, really frustrating, because that is a grand total of 12 very tall light gray struts, and I had a lot of fears going into these struts that I wouldn't quite be able to complete them, but I just made it. Yeah, that was a really boring part. I'm a pretty enthusiastic mock maker. I love the Lego process, but sometimes there's a portion that frustrates the hell out of me, and this time the portion that frustrated the hell out of me was making 12 very tall, very boring pillars, essentially. And also a problem that I got to for some reason when I was actually connecting it to the bottom of the petals, because as a matter of fact, as you can see, these light gray struts, what they're secured to is the bottom ledge of the petal. Very tiny, teeny tiny little ledge in there. For some reason, the brick height was kind of off, and I needed to elevate them by one plate, but I didn't realize I had to elevate them by one plate until I was kind of partway done, those large petal parts. So that was kind of frustrating, and I was just like, very gingerly injecting these 1x2 plates into like these 12 struts, and some of them honestly never got the plate. Some of them are just too short. Some of them just do not quite meet like the top part. However, they're leaning against the tower itself, so who gives a shit? I guess a part of what you could take away from this is that everyone cheats in a way, you know? Like this Empal Surecon, like all of my mocks, has a bunch of like stupid little hacks, you know? So finally, I got to the top of this tube, I made the flaps right there, and then the time had come to attach the larger pedals, the actual landing platforms. Let me just say, before I come off of tube talk, I did not realize this going into the mock. All of my 2x2x10 strut pieces are all underneath the horseshoe overlook. I've got a bunch of 2x2x10 strut pieces, and they're all on the bottom of horseshoe overlook. So let me tell you, building that massive tube right there was a huge pain in the ass without those tall struts to come in and help me out, because boy howdy, those tall struts are very helpful, and let me tell you, this was hella frustrating to make without those stupid struts. And I was building this thing, and I was like rifling through my black pieces and whatnot. I'm just, where the hell are all my struts, you know? I was like, where are all of the strut pieces that I always use for these larger constructions? And then one day, I was rifling through the black like I often was while building this thing up and being like, where the hell are the struts? And then literally it just dawned on me, I'm just like, oh shit. And then sure enough, I looked under the horseshoe overlook, and there it was, a forest of 2x2x10 struts. But yeah, the landing platforms. It was around this time, actually, that I pulled out and reviewed my old Emperor Palpatine's shuttle set, in the hopes that said Emperor Palpatine's shuttle set would be able to balance on these landing platforms. The landing platforms were kind of frustrating, in their own way, because it took a lot of trial and error to make sure that the length was good, as well as the the length had to be considered both in terms of accuracy to the film and in terms of what the thing could actually support. Because at that point I have used a ton of Technics inside this thing, so I was running out of like Technic beams and whatnot. And unfortunately for the internals of that thing, I used an unfortunate amount of light gray Technic beams, which I should not have been doing because I needed the light gray Technic beams for the undercarriage of these landing platforms. So it was kind of a balance between what I could manage to support with the amount of light gray Technic beams that I had, and what could look the most accurate. And what I got was this, and I think it actually turned out pretty darn good. I think it's a pretty solid length. How many studs do you think this is? How many studs is this landing platform? They're all even, by the way. Accidentally, one of them wasn't even at a time, and that was so frustrating to fix. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, and 58. 58 plus 4, 62 studs. All the way. Each one of those bad boys. That is pretty considerable. That is like a good bit longer than the big gray base plate pieces. So yeah, those are long landing platforms. Sadly though, I found out after completing them that there was no way that I was gonna make it so that that shuttle could be supported on that landing platform. Fortunately, it was around that time that I realized that that old shuttle set was complete and total bullshit, so it being put on this mock would be like putting a frock on Megan Fox. Anyways, so after that I built up the next sort of brick-built disc. You'll see that there are a lot of similarities between this bad boy on the ground and this bad boy up here. I decided it would be nice sort of to complete that visual motif, put that right there, and then start to actually build up the proper building. After I built that next layer that you can see right there, which for those diagonal didgeridoos on our next octagon level, I put some snot pieces on some jumper plates and positioned them just right so that diagonally they would be facing in a way that would make it so that their edges matched up with the vertical and horizontal pieces, and that was basically it. It was also around this time that I decided that I needed to put the lighting fixtures onto the landing platform themselves, and I knew that I had already exhausted my light gray Gandalf staffs, so I decided to go with the shorter plunger sticks. As you can see, they're the ones that have like the anti-stud on the bottom right there, and I think that they worked just fine. Again, I wasn't sure if I'd have enough of that piece because for this portion I needed to make 24 of them, but I just managed to pull through. Hallelujah. Anyways, so I had that, then I also just decided to add a pipe for fun, and also that little bit of a ramp right there that you can see behind Darth Vader, just because it's what they have in the movie, and yeah, leading up to that door right there. That very short door, but anything bigger would have looked wrong, unfortunately. Take my word for it. Anyways, so then came the moment of truth. This was the part that I was freaking dreading for so long. I was like, holy crap, how am I gonna properly do this top bit? It was not easy. I sort of worked simultaneously to make the last petals, these bits right here, and the actual bulb that is the top. And working simultaneously to make sure that those pieces all went together was kind of difficult. And unfortunately in the process, the way that I ended up doing it was that all of like the slanted bits and whatnot and everything was sort of very much concentrated towards the middle, and unfortunately there weren't any holes so that these petals could be like securely strung through. Those are sitting basically on the very edge of that platform, and they're very flimsily held. Sure, there are like pieces on the bottom which thread on the inside and sort of create an X, again on a 4x4 turntable in the middle, which is secured by some bricks which are just sort of placed nearby. Like, there is some centrality to that, but these are largely just sort of built on top of the plates that connect to that turntable. In layman's terms, they are not connected securely, and I have paid dearly. Some ways that you can see how I've paid dearly are actually apparent from your view right now. You might notice that this side lacks tubes, and this side the balcony is crooked. That's because at separate points when I was building this bulb, which was essentially using said diagonally built struts and putting like a hinged piece on it and sort of building it outward, and then using hinges on the bottom to build like this part out and upward. Of course, also building it around these like these 1x2x3 sort of upward slanting bits. A bunch of them is like stacked up right there, so that's like 2 plates right there. So that was like 3 for each side, so that was a grand total of 12 like diagonally angled plates, which was really hard because to make sure that they were all like uniform in how they were angled, and it took a lot of work. But anyways, while I was working to try to get all of these plates angled properly, a lot of the time the diagonal plates right there, a lot of the time my hand would bump it or it would shift, and that whole thing would snap off and fall. And that build right there is surprisingly heavy. That is like a dense little bit. That is like a dense little construction there. So on separate occasions, those two fell off. When this one fell off, it was destructive as hell. When it fell, it took out this plate, fortunately not the tubes underneath, and it also took out the balcony. I was able to try to secure the balcony, however, trying to secure the balcony while also making sure that this previously mentioned very loosely put in plate right here maintained, really hard. So I managed to jam it in there, although it's at kind of a wonky angle. When this one fell off, it was arguably a lot more destructive because it fell, it broke the tubes, it broke this plate, it broke this bit, and that whole plate like peeled off. Unfortunately, I was really struggling now with this very tiny crevice to work in to like stick all that back where it was. I was able to put the balcony on a lot better because this whole plate was just gone. So I was able to put that back, but unfortunately the tube system wasn't going to work, and I needed to do something that was a bit more reinforced up here, which unfortunately did not end up involving tubes. Look at this thing from any other angle and you've got tubes, but unfortunately because due to an accident involving this stupid pedal up here, this bad boy ain't got tubes. But, you know, what looks worse, do you think? Wonky platform or no tube? I don't know. Either way, case in point, that was super freaking annoying. But finally, we got to the top bit. And at the top, as you can see from the pictures on Instagram, I'm sort of at the core of those outward-facing things. I put Anakin's operating table like right in the center, and then I built out from that. However, unfortunately, I accidentally made it so that the surgery platform, that actual room in there, is a little one stud too wide on this side. It is just a teensy tiny weeny little bit too wide. Which is why, as you can see, this side has a 2-brick sort of extension right there. Something that is not present on this side. That is because I fucked up this side. So, that's why this side is fucked up, unfortunately. But like I said, I just extended things a little bit. I added an extended window piece over here, so it's just a little bit wider, so it's still able to make like the circle effect, and nobody has noticed, fortunately. But no, as I was building up that base platform there and accidentally making it a stud too big this way, I made sure to add on these little ledges that you can see these little spires are built off of. Built it up a little bit, then I decided to institute a bunch of like hinge pieces to go all the way around and have the black rim, and then to put on the window pieces that I actually had ordered for the damn first light. But you know. So after I managed to build up those windows and put smooth pieces on the top and make sure it was all pretty, I did arguably probably the easiest part of this whole thing, which was making that roof, which was pretty simple. I know the roof in the movie is a lot more bulbous and mine's looking a little bit flat, but at this point I couldn't give any more shits and I was running out of patience for this mock. So I built up that roof bit and I put on a whole bunch of fun antennas and whatnot. I put on that little Republic symbol because I thought it would be neat. I put in the 2 balls right there because I thought it would make a nice symbol with the phallic shaft right in the middle. 2 matching guys over there. Some fun stuff going over here, some fun stuff going on over here. I just had fun with the antennas on top, you know? Had like a weird alternating stud thing for that one right there. So like there's a lot of fun to be had with like the top portion of this mock, you know? But yeah, and in the end, you know, it's been admired by like 4 people on Reddit and over 300 people on Instagram. 300 people liked it. And you know what? I know that isn't that much for like big people or whatnot, and they're just like, oh, only 300. I would get that with my pinky. Well, guess what? I don't get much of anything. No one really pays any attention to me. This video probably has a grand total of like 3 views. So you know what? 300 likes means a lot to me. And you know what? It was very flattering. This thing was a labor of love, and it was a testament to my love of the scene. And also, this was like my rebound after the first light fell over and exploded, you know? After that thing fell over, I was feeling really bad, and I was feeling really shitty, and I was thinking to myself, damn, what the hell am I gonna do with myself now? And I figured I needed to make something grand and cool to come back with, you know? Because you can't have your first light fall over and just bounce back easily. Not to mention, I thought that this would be a mock that I'd be working on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Between my new job at the winery and school and whatnot, I thought that this thing would be a long project. However, I finished it over the course of like 3 or 4 weeks because of the corona. And because of the corona, I was like, I had so much more time because work, you know, laid me off for quite a while now. So no wine selling for Frank for now. But yeah, got laid off, and school's all been from home with barely any like lectures or seminars or anything. So I had like way more time to build this, and it kept me occupied for the first portion of the crisis. And now that it's complete, I have absolutely nothing